Here. Okay, so it is 8th of May and it's 7:31 and we're getting ready to start the APDC meeting. The meeting is being recorded via the Zoom software, and it'll be posted tomorrow on the Lunenburg Access YouTube channel. And we're using something new tonight, so we have some language that we have to read. And it says that the town of Lunenburg utilizes the Zoom platform as host for its hybrid and remote meetings. The Zoom platform utilizes AI technology known as AI Companion to create audio transcriptions of meetings to aid in the subsequent preparation of meeting minutes, and that AI Companion is activated immediately upon launching the Zoom application. You are hereby notified that this AI technology may capture audio prior to the start of the meeting and following the conclusion of the meeting. Participants via Zoom may use the raise the hand feature to request to speak. Public participation is encouraged. The agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed and those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken because of these discussions. Not all items listed, in fact, may be discussed. All other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. Tonight is the first night that we've used AI Companion for our APDC meetings. And I guess there are actually some people that watch our meetings, even though they don't participate in them. Because when I looked at the head count for views, we had, like 25 or 30. So kind of crazy. But we don't have anybody online with us today. We don't have anybody with us. We have Richard McGrath and William Lloyd. Nathan Lockwood had business that he had to conduct tonight for work, and hence he's not here. William, were you able to crank out the meeting minutes from the 10th of April?
Yes.
All right. Did you send those? Because I didn't see.
I did, but I didn't get to send them until late this afternoon.
Okay. All right. So we'll look at those at next month's meeting.
Okay.
And then that way there we'll have a chance to see if there's any changes. But we won't approve those tonight. We'll look at those and we'll approve those at our meeting. And you've been sending the approved meeting minutes off to the town clerk, right, for posting on our website.
I have via the Outlook. I'm not sure if they're going through though.
Oh,
I might have to just use it my Gmail.
Okay.
You could just check on the town website.
Yeah, I don't think they're all there.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'll follow up on my personal email.
I want to make sure that if we have minutes and we approve them, I really want to make sure we get those posted. I've been looking at some other boards and committees, and there's big gaps in meeting minutes, and that's a dangerous situation.
Really?
Yeah, and the one that really has me concerned is the Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Committee. There's big gaps in meeting minutes for meetings that were held in 22 and 23.
At the Historical Commission, we got a complaint to the Attorney General's office because we had gaps in our minute history that I was unaware of. Most of it was that we had no quorum for the meeting, and I didn't know that I had to
make a note.
Make a note to the clerk that there was no quorum.
Okay.
So there was no minutes.
So the gaps were actually meetings that didn't happen because you didn't have a quorum.
Yeah, but someone complained to the Attorney General's office. I had to go through this big rigmarole.
I think because I've been a pretty active participant. We've had a couple meetings that have been canceled because of a lack of quorum. But I think that meeting minutes, either they weren't, I can't remember whether we had approved them or whether they weren't done. But there's particularly in 23 and in some in 22, there's some big gaps for meeting minutes. And so I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that our meeting minutes are on, because you can't get into big trouble, as Richard knows. All right. So let's talk a little bit about annual town meeting and the reports that were made. I did not see you two gentlemen at town meeting. Maybe you were hiding in the wings.
I was over on the left side.
Oh, were you really? I was looking for you, Richard.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
So for some reason they didn't cancel kids sports. this year, so both my kids had sports out of town.
Oh,
My
So-
wife was at one, I was at the other.
That's always an issue.
Last year
They did,
canceled
yeah.
or rescheduled.
But that's because they had a really critical school issue before town meeting. I think that was.
Maybe that's why they did it last year.
Yeah. So let me ask you what your thoughts were about the Brooks House, and the report that was made.
specifically, did you?
Well, I mean, like, the one thing that I made a comment that the committee, first of all, they really did a lot of work in a very short period of time, and, you know, that's, I never like to see that, I always like to see some deliberation. So they went from the 8th of April with no work done to having a report done. And of course, the one big key thing that they discovered was that parking was not an issue, because when the Brooks House was, or not the Brooks House, when the library was built at its new
Yeah,
location,
Yeah, I remember. that.
they had set aside parking specifically for the Brooks House. And the parking lot at the library is much bigger than it needed to be because of the Brooks House. So that kind of took a lot of air out of those on the Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Committee that wanted to set the building on fire.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Kind of, you know, it now made one of the biggest objections that people had, you know, oh, there's no parking, to being a non-issue.
Yeah.
The one thing that I'm concerned about is they continue to want to just lease the property and the house. They do not want to sell the land, and, you know, I think that that's gonna make it, I think that's gonna make it very difficult for a private enterprise to come in and, you know, do something positive with the Brooks House. I think if they want to spend the money that it will take, that they would probably want to have control of the property, not just have it as a long-term lease. And then the other thing, I didn't realize this, and I'm not sure if it's actually the case, but according to the report that was given, if the property is leased, then all of the prevailing wage rules and those types of things still apply. And that may make restoration of the Brooks House more expensive. Now, the one thing that I know from having worked for the government is that prevailing wage for structures that are residential are much different than prevailing wage rules for structures that are more commercial. You know, so if someone did actually agree to lease the property and do the work on the Brooks House, prevailing wage might be just what the current wage would be for the types of tradesmen that would show up at the Brooks House. I mean, this is not, you know, a 50-story skyscraper in downtown Boston, you know, where you have unionized workers making, you know, $50-$60 an hour, you know, because it's a house structure, residential structure. You know, your tradesmen for that type of facility are probably going to be making what the prevailing wage rate. In fact, there's actually I know from when I worked at the Air Force, there was actually two different wage rates. One was for residential work, because we had a lot of housing on base, and that was much closer to what the actual rate was for anybody who showed up to do work at a house versus what was going to take place at the base buildings. So, you know, but I think it would be cleaner and easier if that piece, you know, if there was not this bias that we want to sell the property, you know, they're willing to sell the house if somebody wants to move it, which I think is a stretch. But, you know, so I made that as a comment at the meeting. I said, you know, I'm glad to see that we made some progress. But I think that, you know, there should be no restriction on whether it's sold or leased, depending on what the individual that might have interest in it. The other thing that I asked, separate from the town meeting, but as part of the last Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Committee, was that when the proposal is actually crafted and put together, that there is a process whereby you have to evaluate a proposal, but you have like a section that says, these are all the things we think you could use with the Brooks House, you know, all the use allowed by, you know, the village district zoning laws. but to put a section in there that says, but if you have another idea that's not covered under our village district zoning requirements, tell us what it is and we'll evaluate that, you know, so I've asked specifically for that type of language to be in any kind of a project development agreement that might be sent out as part of a request for proposal. The other thing that I did, separate from the discussion at town meeting, was I sent an email to the town manager. And I suggested that she look at both the gas station project, you know, north of Main Street, that's owned by the town, it's not part of the town property base, and the Brooks House, and look at developing common language for a project development agreement for both parcels. You know, like, how do you sell it? You know, how do you ensure that the buyer or the leaser, depending on how you approach it, how do you establish you know, some sort of a performance requirement that they have to meet, or the property reverts back to the town? You know, there's a couple ways of doing that. One would be to have a performance bond, you know, that would last for 5 years, or, you know, some sort of a clause that says if you haven't started working on it, or if you haven't done something that meets the use requirements, that the property would revert back to the town of Lunenburg. I says, and look at that, both parcels, and maybe even consider packaging both parcels for one entity. You know, that it might be something that now somebody looks at it and says, oh, I got this piece and I got this piece, so maybe I can you know, work on those both together and get some economy of scale by having, you know, one project manager, you know, one crew of tradesmen working at both facilities. She hasn't responded to that. But I think, oh, and then there was one other suggestion that I made, and I don't know what's going to happen with this one. And that is both the 925 gas station and the Brooks House, I think they ought to be pulled out from underneath the Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Committee, and maybe ask the Economic Development Committee to take on that responsibility to help develop a project agreement, so that we don't have, that we have people that are in the business world, like the Economic Development Committee has people that have businesses, you know, and let them look at it and provide some sort of guidance on how these two parcels could bring, you know, some additional tax revenue to the town of Lunenburg. So, like I said, I sent an email to her separately after town meeting about the Brooks House and 925, and hopefully she'll have a chance to look and digest. So those, that's the Brooks House for me. And then the Lunenburg Municipal, did you stay to the bitter end, Richard?
I did.
Yeah. That was a long meeting. We were there from 9 o'clock in the morning till like 5 after 5. The Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Project, while it received more votes in favor than against, it didn't hit the 2/3 threshold. Now, that project is on the ballot. It's on the 17 May ballot. And if it gets more than 50% of the votes cast, then it would go back to town meeting in November for another shot at the 2/3. I think that if it would get approved by the voters as part of the 17 May election, I think that there will be a lot of pressure for approving it at town meeting in November. Not as a member of the Architecture Preservation District Commission, but I remain completely opposed to that project. I think it's way out of scope. And you know, and I've been feeding information to the town manager, and I said this at the town meeting. We have about 40 employees that need space to do the administrative functions. Now, according to Dave Blatt, we have 51 employees. Not all are in what I classify. I actually did a head count, and I looked at the directory, and you know, we have people like PAC videographers that don't really have office space. You know, they're assigned to go out and take videos of different meetings. But if we have 40 employees, we need 8,000 square feet of space. Ritter has 5,700. And one of the reasons why I noticed that there were deficiencies in the meeting minutes for the Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Committee is that I went back through all of the meetings we had to try and figure out what did we identify as square foot requirements for this project. And the last or the first meeting that we had in 2024, which was in September, we had no meetings from the 8th of November 23 through the 9th of September of 24. And at that meeting, we were discussing, the fact that the select board was gonna set aside $225,000 in ARPA funds for the project, and we were kind of re-engaging. The committee was, being called to re-engage. And in that set of meeting minutes, we said a 4,000 square foot annex or addition to Ritter, which would give us about 10,000 square feet of renovated space, new space, 5,700 from here, 4,000 to there. And that's more than enough to put the 40 people that we have in the administrative function. Yet what we have that went before the voters at town meeting and what will go before the voters on the 17th of May is an addition that's 14,400 square feet, which is just so out of whack, so now, the good news is, I think that there's strong commitment to preserving, now this is a PDC business, there's strong commitment to preserving town hall and the road, and that's always good news, so. All right, any comments, questions, Richard, anything else from that you gathered from the town meeting?
When we sold the town sold the Jones house, we had covenants. For that, that the new owners had to fix it up to certain criteria, historical criteria, and that if they didn't meet the requirements, it would revert back to the house. So we had that clause in that one.
Did you guys, the historic commission, develop it?
Yes, yeah, there's a model for it, all the documents, I think they're in the file cabinet.
That's good, and that's information that the new town manager needs to know.
Yeah.
Did they actually, what did they sell the house for? Was it more than just a nominal dollar, or was there actually some value
Yeah,
to
there
that?
was some value. I think it started, I don't remember, it started over 100, and there was no interest, and then it was put back on the market, I think at 53, and it sold for below that. I don't remember how much below, but quite a bit below, because it needed a lot of work. The town had the house for decades and never maintained it, and people that were renting it from the town didn't maintain it. So it was in dire need of repairs.
Were there multiple bidders for the property?
I don't recall. There wasn't many, if there was. And the annex, that house next to here was the police annex. Same thing, the town, there wasn't a full-time facility manager like Chris Ruth back then, so all the properties suffered. So that house was pretty much run into the ground cosmetically. If you looked at it, it was an eyesore, so people wanted to tear it down, but structurally it was intact. So the historical commission was able to lobby and advocate for that property, and it was sold also.
That's good, interesting.
Yeah.
Those are good case studies for the town to look at for both 925 as well as for the Brooks House. The whole issue of, like, in Ohio, you have to auction property off in Ohio. Public property can't be sold. It can be sold, but it can't be like a traditional private real estate transaction. You actually have to have an auctioneer, and it's just the way it is in Ohio. It's a little bit different.
Out west.
Like that out west too.
No, that
Yeah,
used to be out west.
right.
We're doing stuff.
Yes, that's true. Okay, well, that's all good information, because I think that, when you have, public property and you wanna give it to a private entity, there's gotta be some hooks, you know, it's like, you can't just get this and do nothing with it. So, that's good information. All right,
Like the car and copy for the Brooks House.
yeah, I know,
Those are really-
Yeah, that's in a lot better condition than
Yeah.
these other two properties.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was, who advocated for the warrant article at town meeting? Historic Commission? Or the
Yes,
select-
yeah, I'm pretty sure we wrote that.
Okay. All right, any other questions about town meeting? Okay, one other thing about town meeting, I did see, Adam Kovacevic, he's obviously there, and I had a long conversation with him about our joint merger. I says, Adam, I says, I know you've been busy, I says, but, you know, next week I'm calling you, we're gonna sit down and talk about our article merged to the Historic Commission and APDC together. He says, I understand, he says, well, we're ready to go with that.
Good.
So, all right, opengov.com, review and approval process. So as we approved the termination of applicability, the DOA, at our meeting in April, there wasn't any way for me to go into opengov.com and actually approve the document. And Logan O'Connell, who's the land use administrative assistant, he had to send me an email and say, do I have your permission to go into opengov.com and say you approved it? And I says, absolutely. I says, but we need to figure out how to do that. So I can do that without you having to call and ask me. So I had my training last week, and I now have a new, there's two, apparently, opengov.com has a porthole for the public, and then it has a porthole for the worker bees who are reviewing and approving and transmitting documents from one place to the other. And so I had to get a password and an ID to get into the worker bee side, which I now have. So that means that if we get a determination of applicability through opengov.com, we can talk about it, and we can review it in the system. And then after we have our vote, I can then go into opengov.com and say, we met, we saw, we reviewed, it's approved, you know, you can now do your work. And that'll be all recorded, and then it'll be transmitted within the opengov.com based on my direct input, which I think is great. I mean, I think that this is absolutely positively the way to go, because as it turned out, after we had our meeting Thursday night, of course, nobody's at town hall on Fridays. So I was gonna, you know, it's like, oh, I gotta call and tell them it's approved. And it's like, oh, I can't do that today. Well, then I was gonna do that the first part of the week. I didn't do it on Monday. And then Logan sent me the note on Tuesday via email and says, did you guys approve this? And I says, yeah. And he says, do I have permission to do that? That won't be the case anymore, you know, so because I will now have a reminder that that item is open. And I'll get an email that says, you have to approve this, you know, so that'll be a constant reminder, not an email or phone call from Logan saying, hey, you didn't do your job.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Now, what that means is that who's ever the chair come 1 July has to have that same capabilities. Now, if it's me, that's no problem. But if we decide to restructure the committee, then we have to deal with that as part of that restructuring. So, all right. Just talked about the merger update. You know, so town hall is the repair projects. If you notice, this building now has a posted building permit. So FRG, the contractor that was over there, is now over here. And I don't think they've done much work yet, but they're about to begin.
Mhm.
The scaffolding I learned today when I came in to do my absentee ballot is for the cellular system stuff that's on the tower. It's not related to FRG's work. It's related to the cellular tower stuff.
Are they doing the weather thing?
No.
No.
No, and I think that, you know, we gotta keep an eye on that. We gotta keep an eye on that through, I think, the upgrade renovation project that's on the
Yeah,
table.
the town paid.
Yeah.
$3,000.
You get that weather vane down?
Have that weather vane made, and it's been sitting up there for 10 years maybe.
My hope is that, well, of course, if the vote, if it passes next Saturday, the municipal building design project, and it goes before the town in November, we'll have a construction project this time next year, the design will probably be just about finished, if that's the timetable. But that means that something could happen on town hall, by this time next year. If it doesn't pass on Saturday, then, then we're back to where we were. But I think that there's been a lot of progress made. And one of the things that, from an Architecture Preservation District Commission perspective is that the engineer's estimate proved that fixing up the old buildings is cheaper than building 14,000 square feet of new building space. And
it's cheaper all the time.
it does, Richard. And another piece that supports this is the school committee just got its report back. They hired an engineer to go through Turkey Hill to see, should they repair it or should they build a new one? And their cost per square foot came back almost the same as what the cost per square foot was produced by Taylor and Burns and his engineering staff and cost estimating staff. Which says, these are probably the right numbers,
Using the same software.
Yeah, well, I don't know whether they're using the same software, but I think it's, and as it turns out, my son told me this today, because he's on school committee. And because I had told him what I thought it would be when they went out and hired that. Because Dad, it was right, he says, you hit it right on the head. I says, yeah, like that, this is not rocket science at this point in time. So the school committee is now looking at a renovation project, which I think is great for the town. We have greater needs for paying people, and we shouldn't overspend on paying for buildings. I mean, schools suffering big time, So I think if we take a smart approach to the building business, we'll have more money to pay people. So, all right, what do you know about 763 Mass Avenue? I know something, but I want to hear what you know.
Last I heard, they were turning it into 2-family and building the condos in front. What did you hear?
I heard that Brian Gingras, he gave me this report. He went over with the new owner. They're in the process. The person who owns that property they didn't close as of last
They're
Thursday.
selling it?
Yeah, but he says it's real close. He was in the house. They looked at how to split the house into two and make it a duplex. He says it's a perfect setup for turning it into a duplex. The other thing that he told me was that the people that are buying the property are the same people that are building the condo duplexes on Mass Avenue. Now, maybe you're thinking that's the new owner. But that is.
Well, I was told that was they had money down on it, or they had some binding agreement with the owner in Florida that they were going to own it, because I had somebody that was wanted to buy the house and restore it as a single family, and the real estate agent said no, that it wasn't for sale, so because they got developer had some tie to it.
What Brian told me was that they're having a hard time selling those condos on Mass Avenue. That process has slowed significantly. They only have one sold. And he told me that that's going to have an impact on how fast there's development at the old funeral home site. So
they also have they either own or they have a tie to the stone barn,
stone wall or whatever
The
it's
same
called.
thing, Stone Farm right across the street.
Yeah,
which kind of makes
The
sense.
barn across the street, they have that property also.
That was previously owned by the guy that built my house. He sold it
Hmm.
2 years ago.
So that's supposed to be condos like the other ones.
Okay, well, I think that we're gonna save some of 763 Mass
And
Avenue.
they're still in,
In violation.
demolition delay.
Yeah.
They're in violation of that, yeah.
Well, that's still a piece that we need to keep an eye on though, because things can always change.
Yes,
All right, I don't have any report on 50 Main Street, and then the other
it's
items,
deteriorating daily.
It
My
is.
report.
yeah, it is.
I go by there all the time.
Okay, anything else that we need to talk about tonight?
Property owned. Work plan for fiscal 23, 24, what is that?
That was do the notifications. I'm gonna take that off of there because until we get merged, we're not gonna do anything with that.
And did I hear correctly, our budget was diminished or deleted?
No, it was, and we're now at $500.
$500?
What I didn't know, Richard, when we approved that, this is actually, I think, before your time, when, I don't know whether you were on the APDC when we asked the town for $5,000. I thought that was a one-time appropriation, but it got built into the town budget as $5,000 a year.
Mhm.
I don't know if we need $5,000 a year to conduct our business.
We should,
Now we got $500 a year to
have an
conduct our business.
agenda to discuss that. There can be signage and, different things that could be done. I don't know if it's 5,000. but
I'll add that to
We
the,
should think about it seriously, what could be done with a budget. They deleted the historical commission.
Yeah, you
or
guys
they
got-
diminished it from 4,000 to 1,500.
Oh, wow.
It was because of the lot of meetings where we didn't have a quorum. And particularly towards the end of the winter, going into spring, we weren't able to use the budget. So, and when I first got on the commission, it was always, you gotta spend all the money, or they're gonna take it away. So they'd spend the money, and we'd have drawers and drawers full of paper and office supplies and pens and, everything back then. And they'd always spend the money no matter what. I didn't wanna spend the money and do it frivolously on things that we didn't need. So it didn't get spent, so that's what they mentioned at town meeting, that the new budget was relevant to what our expenses were from the previous year, so.
That's crazy, because there's always something historical that can be upkept or
Yeah,
improved.
yeah.
I,
No one talked to us either,
Yeah.
they're looking at it, well, they didn't spend this, they don't need it, so we're gonna take it out.
Yeah.
Especially in times where money is tighter,
Mhm.
that's gonna happen.
we'll add that to the agenda, and I'll send a note to Nathan to have him start thinking about that too, since he's not here. When we got to 5,000, I thought that was a one-time appropriation. It didn't occur to me that it wasn't a one-time appropriation, so I saw that chart.
Yeah,
At town meeting, it was like, oh, so we were being appropriated $5,000 a year?
yeah, that's what, yeah,
I didn't realize that.
that's what Heather had given us, yeah.
I thought it was a $5,000 appropriation for that budget year that we were planning for, which was by, let's see, I was here 22, so it was probably fiscal year 23 that we asked for that money.
Yeah,
And we got it,
Yeah.
but I didn't realize that we were gonna get that in 24
Mhm.
and then 25. Now, we're not gonna get it in 26.
no.
We're only gonna get 500.
If we have special projects or needs, we'll have to approach the town manager for extra funds at that time.
Okay, all right, so
Not right done yet.
we'll put that on our list. Like, what are the things that we should be spending money on? Rather than, how do we spend $5,000? We should take the approach of what are our real needs,
Mhm.
and then we can develop a budget based on that.
Yes,
like I said, until I saw that chart on Saturday, Richard, I thought we only got that one $5,000 appropriation.
Oh, yeah, I understood it.
And you were chair then, that's the reason why.
Yeah. All right, so that's that. Bill Laxo's, I could email today, he's at 94, he's reapplied for, to join the historical commission again. So he filled out a form.
And you, Richard, or you, Em, are you gonna be part of us next year?
Yes, so I figured I could continue until the merger,
Okay,
and then I remember we said when the merger happens, it would be.
Yeah.
Filling spots.
yeah, restacking,
so-
Yeah.
yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
I,
Have you,
uh,
wait, have you
yeah.
filled out did you get an email from the
I
town
did
manager?
not get an email,
All
but
right,
I'll reach out to him tomorrow, well, by Monday.
you have the form based on the email that I'll send it to you again, just.
That's right, cause I have yours.
Yeah, all
Yeah.
right, so you can just send that back to her, fill out the form, send it back to her. You know, the other thing is. Do you realize that the town has like this big. Set of requirements for getting renewed, did you know that?
Mhm.
I went in, like, when I saw the reappointment form, I Googled the town website, and it's like, whoa, look at all these things. Now, technically, this is what's supposed to happen if you read the process that's, you know, been approved by the select board. Is that my reappointment letter and your reappointment letter will then have to come back to this body,
What's the letter?
the one that says, I want to be reappointed.
It's a form.
It's a form, yeah. That form has to come back to this body, and this body has to make a recommendation. Back to the select board that they want Tony and William to serve again on the APDC. And then the select board will then. Bring us back in for another interview. I didn't realize that was an actual
I
requirement,
mean, the people that recommended,
being reappointed. Yeah.
so you and I would have to go in to speak?
Well, no, I'm not sure who would have to come in because these bodies are so small. But someone has to go before the select board.
You say we okayed it,
Yeah,
but the letter is not enough.
yeah. And then the individuals have to be interviewed by the select board too. When I read that, I thought, somebody must have been misbehaving.
Yeah. A lot of tape to get through. For commissions that only have single digit members.
They must have had somebody that they really didn't want to serve, that they really didn't want them to serve again.
Gave them 3 options out.
So they come up with all these requirements, you know, like,
Right.
so. William, thank you for hanging in with us, and thank you for doing the work on the meeting minutes. I really appreciate your time and effort to do that. I know you're busy, you got a family, it's much busier than my family, so thank you very much for doing that.
No problem.
Okay,
One other thing,
yeah, go ahead.
I spoke with Leandra Walker on the corner of Whiting and Lancaster about selling her house to a party that is interested, that I know of,
Mhm.
in buying it, restoring it, and would let her live there as long as she needed to.
Okay.
You know, if she couldn't get into elderly housing, she can stay there while the house is being restored.
Is she agreeable?
She's interested, yeah, she's she's away right now, so when she gets back in a few weeks, I'm gonna set up a meeting to look at the property. I showed the party that was interested. We walked around the outside of the property and looked at it. It's deteriorating more rapidly all the time. It's really over the years, it's really, I mean, every year.
Yeah.
There's-
Especially that roof.
Yeah, I
Probably
get
all kind of water. in it.
I
Yeah.
told her I'll get up there and re-tack those shingles on the
Mhm.
front. The sill is rotten and almost disappeared in the back, and
Yeah.
there's holes in the water table. The interior looks good looking in through the windows.
Do you need any help with that? please let me know.
Yeah, but, the man interested in purchasing it is interested in restoring it to its original conditions.
It'd be a great add back to the
Yeah,
district.
and it was just, 25 years ago, that property was mint.
Was it really?
Yeah, for its entire life, that was never deteriorated before, that was always a primo property.
It would be really great if she, if she's willing to, I mean, it sounds like it's a risk-free operation for her.
Yeah.
And like if he gives her a life estate,
Yeah.
then legally she's protected.
Yeah, and she's always been interested in having it, selling it to someone that was interested in
Restoring.
restoring. She said she gets calls every week from people that wanna buy it and flip it. So maybe tear it down and build something else.
Yeah. Put an ADU on it, make more money. Okay, anything else?
That's it.
There's a note here, it says our next meeting is 12 June, but the master plan steering committee is was looking at that as a date by which the draft master plan would be discussed at a meeting at Smokestacks Roasters, and everybody, all the different organizations like us, the Historic Commission, I'm responsible for doing the publicity, making sure that an email goes out to all the chairs of the various organizations that are listed on the town website, know about that. Now, the catch is that the date of 12 June was picked like a month ago, and no work has been done to actually contact the owner of Smokestacks. So the master plan steering committee, I've gone to 2 meetings now, and that committee is it needs some more work. You know, the group is, like, for example, so we met by Zoom on the 23rd of April and talked about all the different information that the contractor has produced. And then we says, okay, well, we got to have another meeting with the contractor. We had a lot of questions about, how he did it and what the rankings were and what he's recommending. So everybody says, all right, we'll have another meeting quickly because we have this deadline of June 12th. We want to start talking about a draft, got to get the final word. And it is now May 8th, May 9th. We can't even set a meeting date. I mean, it's like the chair sent out a note and said, here's some options, tell me which ones work. And we haven't picked a date for the meeting, and it's kind of like, this is like simple, say I can be there or I can't be there, but don't just not respond. Don't just sit there and not do anything. In fact, today, another email went out, or one of the members who I think has pretty good idea as to how to be a good committee member. And she says, maybe we need to resurvey again. Because I sent a note Friday, it says, hey, have we picked a meeting date? Because I'm actually going to be traveling again next week. And it was like, no, we still don't have a consensus. And then to the day, the note went out and said, hey, maybe we should repoll the committee again. And oh, by the way, all the people that got that email, many of them aren't on the committee anymore. It's sad. So, okay, all right. Well, hopefully that'll get fixed. Anything else?
So with that said, do we want to slide ours to a different date?
Let's see. I actually think that there's a greater probability that we're gonna have June 12th open
Have
for us to have our meeting. If it had moved, William, I would say, yeah, let's pick a different date. But at this point right now, I think we'll be meeting on the 12th of June. All right, motion to adjourn? All right,
Second.
all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thanks for everybody for being here. Yeah.